Welcome everyone to the Rotary Club of Jacksonville Zoom at noon meeting. I will now call the meeting to order by ringing the Rotary bell. We have a packed program today and plan to adjourn by 12:45. During the program, everyone will be on mute, so please feel free to submit questions you might have by utilizing the chat function. I also want to remind you that today's presentation is being recorded. Today's invocation will be provided by past President Tracy Jenks. Tracy?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Please join me in a moment of reflection and thanks with these words. With our friends beside us and no person beneath us, with the bonds of Rotary between us and our worries behind us, with our goals before us and no task beyond us, with a thirst for knowledge and a dream of a polio-free world, we are thankful for our Rotary friends and the beautiful day we share.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sure.
Our President-elect designee and membership chair, Jim Agee, will now introduce today's newest member. Jim? I saw Jim.
President Jerry, it appears that we've lost Jim temporarily. Can you please move on to the next announcement and let's come back?
Okay, certainly. Announcements. I want to thank all of our members that joined District Governor Rich Turnbull and his wife Marie and I as we presented $50,000 to the Youth Crisis Center. I want to thank Rotarian Pete Hicks, who arranged the event and then provided a tour of the newest facility, the House of Hope. We also had wonderful press recognition in the news thanks to our public image chair, Dawn Alexander. We were featured on WJCT's First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross, the Daily Record, and a number of other media outlets. These contributions would not be possible without each member. All of you played a part in supporting this project by simply being a member of our Rotary. Thank you. We have an announcement from Jeannie Terrace, who will tell us about a Rotary Fellowship and an upcoming club social. Jeannie?
Jeannie, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Down in the lower left corner, Jeannie.
Unmute. There we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you, President Jerry. Rotary Fellowships are international groups that share a common passion. Being part of a fellowship is a fun way to make friends around the world, explore a hobby or profession, and enhance your Rotary experience. One of my favorite fellowships is the Rotary Means Business Fellowship, or known as RMB. This fellowship hosts activities at the district level. It's a unique way to network and get to know other business professionals within our district. I think Sherry's going to put on the screen the next event scheduled for September 23rd at 5:30 to 7 at the Classic Car Museum of St. Augustine. For some, this might be a little bit of a little far to go, but it's an example of one of the get-togethers. They tend to have them around the district, and actually, if someone wants to host one at one of their businesses, you can do so. Attendees can register at the rmb6970.org, and this information is also in the Spokesman newsletter. Our club is going to host a social with our members via Zoom on Thursday, September 3rd at 5 p.m. The theme is business networking because we want to get to know our members and we want new members to have the opportunity to network with existing members. Registration and details will be in the Spokesman and posted on the website. I'm looking forward to everyone joining in on that networking and to see you there. Thanks again, President Jerry.
Thank you, Jeannie. Rotarian Scott Eater has served 3 decades in the United States Army Special Forces and with the United States Central Intelligence Agency. He has been a valuable asset to our club since joining in 2016. He will introduce today's speaker. Scott? And I saw Scott.
There we go. Thank you, Sherry. Hear me now, President Jerry?
Yes, I
Yes,
can.
we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, President Jerry, and good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. During the first year of the Trump administration, Colonel retired Chris Costa was detailed to the White House as the Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism. Chris's 34-year government career included 25 years in counterintelligence, human intelligence, and with special operations forces in the United States Army. He served in Central America, Europe, and throughout the Middle East and Afghanistan. He ran a wide range of intelligence and sensitive operations in Panama, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Colonel retired Costa earned 2 Bronze Stars for sensitive human intelligence work in Afghanistan. Assigned to the Naval Special Warfare Development Group with Navy SEALs, he served as the first civilian squadron deputy director almost immediately after retiring from active duty. In 2013, he was inducted into the United States Special Operations Command's Commando Hall of Honor for lifetime service to U.S. Special Operations. Colonel Costa has been the executive director of the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. since 2018. Fellow Rotarians, Chris Costa is a very good friend of mine. He's one of those guys that for the past 20, 30 years, while we all slept very calmly in bed at night, he and some of these other folks are out there doing the deeds to keep us safe and sound. I'm very happy to have Chris here, and I will say one thing. He is a graduate of arguably the best Corps of Cadets in the United States. He is a Norwich University graduate, which used to produce the finest cavalry soldiers in the United States Army about 150 years ago. But I think President Jerry and a few others, Academy graduates, Chris, may not agree with what I just said. But anyways, it's my honor to present my friend and truly a national asset to national security of our country, Chris Costa.
Thank you very much, Scott, for that warm introduction. And let me just say, before I move on any further, I think you already said it, President Jerry, Scott Eater is a great contributor to your Rotary, no doubt. He is also a luminary in our community. So having him introduce me today is a special honor. It's always a privilege for me to talk about my career, even for the little time that we'll spend together, because I think it's a great story to finish up on my time at the White House. It's an uplifting story, despite the fact that counterterrorism is normally a tough subject to talk about. But before I go any further, I also want to say thank you to Tracy for your excellent invocation. So thank you for that. You heard a little bit about my background. So I want to start by saying that my career bridged really 2 worlds. It bridged from the Cold War to a post 9/11 paradigm. But before I even dive deeper, I want to tie in the Rotary from Schenectady, New York, and tell you how the Rotary, and this might surprise you, how that Rotary in Schenectady, New York brought me to the White House. And before you eye roll or are incredulous, let me share the story. I had just left the Special Mission Unit Army, meaning I worked in sensitive activities, and I was selected ahead of my peers, and I say that with all humility, to be a battalion commander, which I know there are distinguished guests because Scott told me who was on board today. Many of you will understand what I'm talking about, but I was selected for battalion command. That's a big honor in the Army, and this is pre 9/11. In fact, I took over the command in June of 2011, but I took over a recruiting command. The Army said, you're a special operator, you're a human collector, you've been out there recruiting assets pre 9/11, and you're a counterintelligence guy. With all of that, we want you to go command a recruiting battalion. I went through the stages, and I don't mean to be too crass here or flippant, but it was really rough on me to go from the place I was to go command a recruiting battalion, but I recognized that's what the Army asked me to do. In August of 2001, I was asked to go to a Rotary to talk about, as an intelligence officer, how we saw the world. And with a great deal of enthusiasm, with my recruiters in tow, because I explained to them that their job in recruiting was to tell them the Army story through their own personal story. So I got a chance to talk about being an intelligence officer. And I delivered what I thought was a pretty important presentation. It was a wonderful opportunity to meet people in Schenectady, New York. 1 month later, 9/11 happened. And shortly thereafter, the folks in Schenectady called me up and said, Chris, everything you talked about happened. You talked about bin Laden. You talked about this idea of jihad, things that the community really didn't quite understand in September 2001. Then, of course, we were all talking about it. All of that said, I almost got to a point of despondency because I wanted to deploy. That's what soldiers do. I wanted to go back to those organizations. I knew exactly what was happening, but my mission was to serve the nation in Schenectady, New York, and be a recruiting battalion commander. But that said, some folks that attended that Rotary asked me to teach in the evenings a course on terrorism, which forced me, and it convinced me at the same time, that I needed to know everything I could about the fight that we were embarking on. If I couldn't deploy, I had to stop feeling sorry for myself, and I had to understand terrorism because I was going to go into a local classroom and teach. All of that said, some years later, when I went into the Trump White House, that first day I reflected on that journey, and I was well prepared. And it started in that Rotary because I learned about the fight that we were embarking on first in the classroom, and then I applied it in the mid-2000s through time with SEALs as I coached and mentored them. And I say that with a little M and a little C. And I took that experience to the White House the day that the president was inaugurated. So let me share with you a little bit about that experience as promised. If I could set the scene a little bit, I started, as I said, on Inauguration Day. As I could hear the cheers, the president had just been sworn in, and it was time for me to roll into the White House, into the Situation Room, immediately upon the swearing to the Constitution. The president did his oath of office. We heard the cheers, and I was responsible for counterterrorism. My boss was to be the President of the United States, the Homeland Security Advisor, and the National Security Advisor, General McMaster. So I muttered a little prayer, I'm sure, to myself, and I went into the Situation Room, and I owned the problems that we were dealing with. And I want to share that first day's experience, the problems we were dealing with on day one, week one. And then I want to contextualize what you really do at the White House. I want to demystify it, and hopefully that will lead to some questions. So day one, week one, we had a decision we had to make on whether we were going to conduct a raid, whether United States Special Operations Forces were conduct a raid in Yemen against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. We owned that decision. I owned a recommendation to the President of the United States and the National Security Advisor. There was a persistent and significant threat to commercial aviation that all of you may remember, that ultimately resulted in a laptop ban, but a whole boatload of other things took place across the globe so that we could make it safe for people to get on planes worldwide, but in particular throughout the Middle East. Commercial flights, a pervasive threat. I can't talk a lot about that because of the sensitivities. Needless to say, we worked tirelessly 7 days a week to make sure commercial airline planes weren't brought down. Thirdly, we had to accelerate the Defeat ISIS campaign. In short, we had to accelerate our strategy to go after ISIS. Now, I want to pause there for a second before I tell you the fourth problem. Let me just underscore and reinforce that any successes we enjoyed while I was in the White House were the result of the people that I was surrounded by, and very different from other things you'll hear from people that worked in that tumultuous, sometimes difficult first year in the administration. I cumulatively took what we had done successfully since 9/11, when we really recreated the entire counterterrorism enterprise as a result of the tragedy of 9/11. I just built upon the success of keeping the nation successful from a counterterrorism attack, or a terrorism attack, better said. So I built on that success. So I rolled into the White House knowing that I had to rely on my instincts, the people around me, the 15 people that worked in my directorate that came from the CIA, that came from the National Security Agency, that came from the FBI, that came from special operations. Those policymakers I was surrounded with were the best that the nation has. But it was a cumulative effort. So I just built upon the effort that was laid, the foundation that was laid before I got there. And lastly, I want everyone to know we had another problem. And we had a problem with hostages that were being held from the Maghreb in Africa all the way to Pakistan. We had Americans that were being held hostage by the Haqqani Network, a terrorist organization that works in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that works those seams. A vicious group were holding Caitlin Coleman and her children. We had Americans that were held by the Syrian government. They don't acknowledge that they're holding Austin Tice and others that I can't talk about. Austin just turned 37, and he is being held by the Syrian government. I failed to bring back Austin home. It wasn't for a lack of trying. We owned bringing hostages home, and we did bring hostages home. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I'll pause just for a second to gather my thoughts and then dive in on what I did at the National Security Council with my team. I was the convening authority for what we called the Counterterrorism Security Group. In short, that's this entire enterprise that included the CIA, the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, every assistant secretary that had the mandate to work counterterrorism issues answered to me, which was extremely humbling, which meant that I represented the President of the United States as the convening authority for that august body that started before 9/11 through 9/11 to the current day. As the convening authority, we worked on policy issues. And I like to talk about 7 bins. And people tell me it's really 7 focus areas, but I binned them into 7 areas. In short, the 7 areas that I focused on and my team focused on started with, we had a team of individuals, 2 individuals that focused on the threat to US embassies worldwide, the threat to the United States day in and day out. When is the United States going to be attacked? Are we going to be attacked? Every threat stream we focused on, the intelligence and mitigation measures. Secondly, I already mentioned ISIS. We had to accelerate our defeat ISIS strategy. Third, Al-Qaeda has not gone away. We had to continue our campaign against Al-Qaeda, not just in the federally administrated tribal area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, but also worldwide, affiliates, branches like Al-Shabaab. We had to also focus on Hezbollah and Shia proxies that you've read about, right? And other groups that were working against US interests. At the same time, we knew we would have to focus on terrorists in their use of the internet, and we would have to have very discreet partnerships with US businesses to work that space. Counter-radicalization more broadly, we had to focus on messaging and work with our foreign partners to counter the jihadists' malign messages. We knew we couldn't do that alone. So we had to work with the government of Jordan. We had to work with the government of Saudi Arabia. We also had to prevent foreign fighters from leaving the United States and other countries and flowing into ISIS. I can say in very short order, nobody was going to fight when I came on board in 2017. In fact, they were dying in place, and there's no better way to put it, and they stopped coming into ISIS. So we were taking away their message and preventing them from traveling in. But that's not to say that the next level was preventing foreign fighters in this post-ISIS world from getting out of Syria, from leaving Iraq, from crossing the border to Turkey and getting into Europe, or someday in the United States. So we consistently focused on policy to get at foreign fighter flow. At the same time, we focused on hostages, as I mentioned. So in short, those were the areas our team worked. For the sake of time, I want you to remember we focused on Charlottesville, and a lot of bad press on Charlottesville, but I want to reinforce the idea that this is the first administration, and I say this from an apolitical standpoint. We have a national counterterrorism strategy published in 2018 that is the best strategy the nation has ever published, save none, because it's built on the foundational work from my predecessors. Not Democrat, not Republican, counterterrorism professionals. All of that said, when you reflect back on what happened in Charlottesville, white supremacists, malign actors on the right, Antifa on the left, the bottom line is we have the nation's first strategy that's going after white supremacists that are living in places and operating on the internet, but living in places like Russia. We've never addressed those kinds of problems in the history of our counterterrorism fight in our nation. Also, I'm not going to speak a lot about it, but I will just say that we focused a lot on direct action. I would love to tell the good people of Jacksonville and the region that I could focus on root causes and some of the drivers for causing terrorism. Candidly, because of that journey that I went on from Schenectady forward, I understood that there are many ways to get at terrorist problems that don't include kinetically striking them and killing terrorists overseas. Unfortunately, I did not have the luxury to focus on that. So we had to focus on policies to kind of reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies, push authorities to other agencies, and let them take it to our adversaries overseas. And one of the greatest policy outputs that we had in the first year of the administration, I cannot talk about. So it's left up to journalists and authors someday, or people to get declassified to tell the rest of the story. But we put a lot of pressure, and we continue to put a lot of pressure on our adversaries when they're forming, when we know they're getting ready to make attacks overseas. In September 2017, September 11th, I had a chance to talk to the president and go into the Oval Office. And in that meeting, we were able to tell the president that we had operationalized much of what we thought was going to be the 2008 counterterrorism strategy. That the staying arc of continuity that I've alluded to is an important piece of information the president had to understand. He acknowledged it, this idea that there aren't any big ideas for counting terrorists. There's no policy consensus on how to do anything any better than that we've done historically. And we're not out of the shadow of 9/11. That was the theme we imparted. So I'm going to finish up on a couple other quick vignettes and then open it up to questions, very mindful that we're limited by time. So I will just say counterterrorism fundamentally is about justice in my humble opinion, and with all humility, I will tell you the best days I had was when we brought Caitlin Coleman and her family home to the United States. I spent time with the Coleman family. My wife has. We have a relationship with all of the hostage families. It's about justice. That was justice, bringing them home. Justice was about identifying that there was a Benghazi conspirator that was operating in North Africa, and some operators set conditions for us to bring Mustafa al-Imam back to the United States to face justice. Not the death penalty, but 20 years in prison. I was very pleased with that, and that was the result simply of policy. We identified the intelligence, we pushed on the interagency to act, special operators did their job, and we executed the target, and Mustafa al-Imam is in prison. Not a lot of people talk about that. That happened in the administration. And just to wrap things up, we have many challenges going forward, and the terrorism threat is not going to go away. But I want everyone listening and watching today to be confident that professionals continue to work 7 days a week. Professionals like Scott Eder continue to quietly do their job overseas, and the special operators that you all appreciate are quietly doing their work. So I will stop there just because I know that we have to take some questions, and I would be happy to answer anything to the extent that I can.
So thank you very much, Chris. We have a few questions. The first question is from Chris Makalekis. As our physical world becomes more interconnected to the cyber world, are our industrial control systems and cyber infrastructure adequately postured to defend against a cyber-connected or an electromagnetic pulse attack?
So I worried about a lot of things while I was in the White House. I didn't focus on those issues exclusively. My boss did, the Homeland Security Advisor, Tom Bossert. The year after Tom and I left the White House, a cyber strategy was published. We recognized that we have to do more to support our critical infrastructure. All of that said, some of the administration's work has leaked. Some of it, the president has deliberately spoke to the public about some of our offensive capabilities. All of that said, I don't know if there will be a cyber 9/11. I can't predict one way or the other, but I will tell you, I know the people that are quietly working on preventing a cyber 9/11. My focus very much was, as it related to cyber, was making sure that we pressured ISIS and other non-state actors so they didn't use cyber tools to undermine our critical infrastructure, because they too would very much like to see disruptions while they perhaps conducted a terrorist attack at the same time. So all of that said, I am confident that the nation understands what the threat is. I just can't really articulate how postured we are to protect the nation from a multi-dimensional attack. Suffice to say, we know that our adversaries, the Iranians, the Chinese, on the cyber domain, and the Russians, of course, have unique capabilities, and they do want to undermine our democracy, and they do probe our vulnerabilities quite frequently.
So this question is from Bill Sorensen. In addressing security concerns regarding commercial flight, how receptive are the Middle Eastern countries to our efforts by the United States?
So when there was a laptop ban, wherever there was certainly a US carrier, and many of the commercial carriers, there was wide-scale cooperation. And I have to give credit where credit's due. Federal Aviation and TSA and our normal diplomatic efforts, because counterterrorism is not exclusively, as I said, it's not about just going after terrorists on the battlefield. So there was a whole-scale, holistic approach to making sure that we communicated across the commercial aviation enterprise. So in short, there was excellent cooperation, and there was a recognition that this would cost a great deal of money. I think all of you who are tuning in today would have very much appreciated the principals, meaning the director of the FBI, the director of CIA, and all of our national leaders early on in the administration. I'm talking the first week of the administration, coming together for principal meetings to put all this together. We have kept the nation safe from commercial aviation, and there haven't been any airlines that have gone down as a result of ISIS or Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. We can't rest with that. Now, we can never claim some kind of success because our adversaries are always trying to play multiple or multi-dimensional chess with us. But I would say there was excellent cooperation across the industry.
So we have a difficult question here that I would not be comfortable answering, but I'm going to ask it anyway since it was asked. It's from Mike Biagini. Do we agree with the withdrawal reduction of American troops from around the world? What role does the U.S. play in policing the world?
So I don't think that's really a terribly difficult question to answer, and I'm going to answer it candidly. I've written one op-ed, very balanced, to the New York Times expressing concern and telling the president to please continue putting pressure on ISIS the first time he talked about a troop withdrawal. All of that said, the nation, our nation, I believe our citizenry does not want endless wars. All of that said, we should not, in my humble opinion, this is just my opinion, we should not be the nation's policeman. We cannot sustain that. So I do believe, as a citizen, the president's sensibilities are right. In 2018, I was extremely optimistic with the work that we had done against ISIS. And I did not want to see troops wholesale being pulled out of Syria because it's only a small number. That said, there's only a small number of troops on the ground in Syria. Special operators working with our foreign partners. We cannot continue this fight without them. But we are not the world's policemen, in my opinion. The United States military should be, to some extent, scaled down. At the same time, we have to balance that with a competition that we've never faced before. This is a new paradigm. The president and our national security strategy wants to pivot to focus more on countering Russia's great power competition with China, mostly China, but also with Russia and other actors. We have to worry about North Korea. But I will tell you, in an interview that was published in CTC Sentinel, an extensive interview with me, I said that we are a great nation and we can do more things at once. So we can withdraw some of our troops. We can fight terrorism and execute a counterterrorism strategy and still counterbalance China. And I will tell you, I got powerful affirmation, for what it's worth, from General Petraeus, who I think is a brilliant strategist and former director of CIA. I was surprisingly very pleased with his approval of my interview, just as one example of some feedback that I got. That's an excellent question. I think we're a great nation, but we can't police the world.
So this question is from Jim Firth. Can you please briefly outline your perspective on the internal/homegrown threat and where it is going in the future versus the international terrorist threat?
So the administration is redoubling its focus, as I understand it, on what they call, I want to get this right, racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, meaning it could be violent actors on the far left of the political spectrum, which we don't talk about anymore. We don't, in the terrorism sphere, call it left or right. But for sake of argument, I'm going to say we're worried about people on the far left acting out, as in November. And the administration is also, in federal law enforcement, is very much focused on violent actors on the far right. So the United States is very much aware that we have threats here in the United States. Actors that are going to take advantage of the polarization across the United States. There are actors, malign actors on both sides of the spectrum that are going to take advantage of that polarization. In some actors, they already have, are going to plan for violence. I think the FBI is redoubling its focus, as is the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. I will say that I also wrote an op-ed lauding the administration, again, an apolitical, as a citizen, because DHS is very much worried about targeted killings. And I'll answer the question with a vignette. In October of 2017, there was 2 tragedies, and I'll bookend those tragedies. The first one was in Las Vegas that had nothing to do with all of the work that I did. Inexplicably, all of the resources I had, I couldn't do anything regarding Las Vegas. That was a domestic, wide-scale mass shooting. We'll never know why that actor killed people in Las Vegas. Now the United States strategy is very much focused on targeted killing, whether it's from the left or right or center, it doesn't matter. There's much more aggressiveness from DHS and FBI and local law enforcement to prevent that kind of attack. At the end of the month, October 31st, on Halloween, an actor by the name of Saipov wanted to drive down a bicycle path in New York City and run down trick-or-treaters and kill moms and dads and babies in baby carriages, literally. He was radicalized by ISIS in his mind, and we are going to face those kinds of self-radicalized actors at the same time. We're going to worry about people using the internet and being radicalized by the far right or the far left. The good news is we are much more aggressive than we ever have been, we being this community. And as I said, the people in the NSC are convening meetings day in and day out. Meetings aren't good enough for you in the American public. What you don't see is the mitigation strategies. When we understand somebody is radicalizing and as a result of sensitive intelligence, it's all about what are you doing, local law enforcement? What are you doing, FBI, to go after that specific threat based on the intelligence that we saw here in the White House? So we have the bully pulpit of the President of the United States to make sure that we are very aggressive to prevent the kinds of attacks that will continue to happen.
So here's another question, and this is from Keith Fairchild. And his question is, what is our greatest threat at the moment, in your opinion?
So these are all excellent questions. I think the pandemic is a significant threat to the United States. And I think the idea of the cumulative effect of a bad fall flu season has to start being considered a national security threat in the first order. I almost find it interesting that I'm saying that, having spent my whole life sleepless about threats from terrorism directed against the United States. But I think we have to start looking at using our vast national resources to protect the nation from future pandemics, to protect the nation also from things that I have not devoted any time to, like the threat to natural resources from global warming. And I joked the other day, and I didn't mean to be flippant, as a grandfather now, I do worry about the following generations. I do worry about the situation regarding climate change. So all of that said, I consider that a threat, those things a threat, as well as terrorism. But I also very much worry about a malign Iran with the nuclear capability, which inevitably they're going to have, and how Israel responds to that, or the capabilities North Korea has, maybe directed at Japan or US troops in South Korea. Also, our adversaries are in short, watching the pandemic like ISIS, like Al Qaeda, and seeing what happens with the ability to use bio weapons, for example, and how they can sow panic as a result of what they're watching regarding a pandemic. So that's not one single threat, it's a multi-dimensional threat. All of those things concern me. But while I was in the White House, what I was sleepless about is threats to the nation from our terrorist adversaries.
So another question from Jeff Lane. Can you describe the transition of counterterrorism efforts from the previous administration to the current administration?
So thank you for that question, an excellent question. And again, I would say that people that work terrorist issues in the administration were neither Republicans or Democrats. They truly were zeroed in on the threat. Not all of the directorates think through the lens of the urgency and the real life shows you've seen on TV, like 24. The people in the counterterrorism sphere did. So I do give the previous administration credit. I built on their work. What's different, I think, is the fact that we were, in my humble opinion, far more aggressive on ISIS, far more quicker, if you will, and we took away some of the bureaucratic impediments, candidly. I would like to argue that we gave departments and agencies what they needed, and we made some of our decision-making more nimble. Insofar as the terrorists or the 2018 strategy, I think it reinforces a building block from 9/11 that just makes it far more cogent, if you will. We are going after white supremacists because the threat has evolved. So really, we built upon the work of previous administration. So you should note that I am friends with my predecessors, and though I don't agree with them, we are all still trying to influence counterterrorism from outside the government, even though all of us have our personal perspectives. So we conversed with each other, and we tried to keep politics out of counterterrorism. And that should be a good news story to everybody listening in. That doesn't mean that we, certainly from my perspective, that we ever undermined what it was the president wanted to achieve. In fact, we delivered incessantly, but at the same time, we had a right and a responsibility, not a right, a responsibility to deliver the president of the United States options for counterterrorism. And I think we delivered him excellent options. And I think the administration's in a very good place when you think where al-Baghdadi is, when you think about what's happened to ISIS, although they're not defeated. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Chris. We have a number of other questions, but we're going to stop there. Thank you so much for your time today. And we really appreciate your effort here. And I appreciate your effort as an American and someone who served. Thank you so much. You've been muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted. Okay. So we're going to go to Jim Agee. Jim is going to talk to us about our newest Rotarian.
Thank you, Jerry. First, I've got to say, Colonel Costa, I believe I'm one of the people that Scott warned you about, that I understood everything you said, and I'm definitely so appreciative of that presentation. It was outstanding. And Scott, thank you so much for bringing Colonel Costa to our Rotary Club to speak. The program committee's just doing a wonderful job right now. I'm a commercial airline pilot during all that time frame, and I know how hard you were working to keep us safe and our passengers safe, and I certainly appreciate it. It's my pleasure today to introduce Jim Firth. Jim Firth recently retired as the Director of Phantom Works Fixed Wing and Weapons for Boeing Defense, Space and Security in St. Louis, Missouri. In that role, Jim led a team responsible for Boeing's business opportunities in future tactical aircraft, advanced mobility, and advanced weapons. Prior to this role, Jim was the Boeing team lead for the Air Force development, acquisition, and sustainment, leading 6 Boeing offices serving Eglin and Hurlburt Air Force Bases, Hanscom Air Force Base, Joint Base Langley Eustis, Nellis Air Force Base, Scott Air Force Base, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Jim joined the Boeing Company in July of 2009 following a career in the U.S. Air Force, serving 34 years. He served in the U.S. Air Force, the Air National Guard, and Air Force Reserve. Jim's Air Force experience include various operational training and staff assignments at the squadron, wing, and major command levels, including command of our very own 159th F-15 Fighter Squadron and the 125th F-15 Fighter Wing right here in Jacksonville. Jim has over 3,700 hours flying the F-15, F-16, and T-38. Prior to joining Boeing, Jim served as Air Combat Command Deputy Director of Requirements, responsible for all Combat Air Force's weapon system requirements, and he was a Chief Combat Aircraft Division at Headquarters Air Combat Command, responsible for the modernization and sustainment of all U.S. Air Force F-15, F-16, A-10, F-117, B-1, B-2, and B-52 aircraft. Jim was promoted to Brigadier General in the Air Force Reserve in April of 2009 and continued to serve until retiring in 2014. Jim is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1980 with degrees in management and economics, a member of the Air Force Association, the U.S. Air Force Academy Association of Graduates. Jim was our starting pitcher on the USAFA baseball team. Allow me to summarize what Jim did for Boeing and will continue to do now as a consultant. He introduces us to and informs us about the technology we need to be investing in to produce the weapons we will need to defend ourselves 30 years from now. In many cases, we don't even have the technology that we need. Jim is smart, tough, and honest. I should know, I've known him for 42 years. My wife, Michelle, and Jim were one class ahead of me, and we were all in the Cadet Squadron 1 together at the United States Air Force Academy. We've all been good friends for a long time. In fact, Jim took Michelle to their ring dance. Jim is a natural and inspiring leader. He was my cadet squadron commander in the Air Force Academy. He was my squadron commander here in Jacksonville. In Iraq, Jim was my flight lead in our squadron's first combat mission since the Korean War. I assumed command of the 159th Fighter Squadron from Jim, and he became the Florida Air National Guard Chief of Staff. On 11 September 2001, I was the commander of the lead air defense fighter squadron for the Southeast United States, and Jim, in his support role as Chief of Staff, provided me with much needed support as we quadrupled the number of our fighters on alert and in airborne defensive combat control patrols in response to the terrorist attacks. I trust and admire Jim Firth. He's going to be a tremendous asset to our Rotary Club. Jim has already secured one of our future program speakers, Lieutenant General retired Steve Quast. I kind of call him the father of Space Command, to address our club on the future of space combat and the chances of securing Space Command headquarters here in Jacksonville at Cecil Spaceport. I know all of you will enjoy getting to know Jim. And now I pass it over to Jim to say a few words. Welcome.
You gotta unmute yourself, Jim.
Okay, I got it to work. It was not allowing me to do it. Anyway, Jim, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the introduction. I'll just say I'm really looking forward to getting to know the people here with the odd situation we have with COVID-19. But when life gets back to normal, the benefits of getting to know the great group that we have here and working together with you, I'm really excited about it. The whole ideals of Rotary, I'm excited about trying to work together to put our heads together to do great things for the community and the region and the world. So just can't tell you how much I'm excited about all the talent that we've got and the good people we've got on the team. So thanks so much. The polarized world we live in right now, that's an exciting aspect of Rotary, where we really listen to each other and leverage all the talents and best ideas. And as Jim said, I've known him for 42 years, and I think the team's going to really enjoy his leadership style in the next term. And that's all I'll say for now. Thanks a lot for the welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Jerry, if you want me to lead this, but this is typical. Everybody on board out in the audience there, we try to go through the four-way test one more time together, just to remind us of why Rotary is unique, why we're able to work together, why we're not just bipartisan, we're nonpartisan, because we do this four-way test. So here we go. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build better goodwill and better friendships? And is it beneficial to all concerned? Thank you very much. Jerry?
Thank you. Our club is strong and we have a lot of volunteers working to contribute to our success. I want to know how much you are appreciated. We have a lot of work to do and I look forward to working with our committee chairs, growing our club, providing great programs like today, and seeking new ways to promote Rotary's great work in our community. Don't forget about our club social that Jeannie talked about. That will be this next coming Thursday, September 3rd at 5 o'clock. We'll send out some information about it. We also have a district seminar coming up on October 24th. We'll put more information about that out as it becomes available. Committee chairs, if you will get with your committee, meet, set some goals, review your committee list, make sure who's on there, and get to us if there's people on there that you want that aren't on there or people who aren't listed. If you need to host a meeting via Zoom, please contact us. We'll help you if you don't know how to do it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Colonel Costa, and thank you, Jim, for being our newest Rotarian. And that will conclude today's meeting. We have a wonderful program scheduled for next week. Dream Big, Florida, Partnerships to Accelerate STEM, Learning and Economic Development. Dr. Kathleen Schofield, who is Executive Director at Northeast Florida Regional STEM 2 Hub, will be our speaker. Thank you again. This concludes today's meeting.